My parents hated me, and when I planned my wedding, they crashed it and started threatening me with a lawsuit, saying they would take my company away. I was born into a world that seemed to reject me from the very start. My parents, who should have been my first source of love and safety, treated me like an unwanted burden. I was the youngest of three, and from as early as I can remember, it was clear I was the mistake. My parents had my older siblings later in life, when they were more financially stable, and the age gap between us was significant. They had already settled into a comfortable routine when I came along, and my arrival disrupted their plans. It felt like they never forgave me for that. My earliest memories are of being ignored or scolded. If I cried, I was left alone to cry it out. If I wanted to play, I was told to entertain myself. There were no bedtime stories or cuddles, no comforting words when I scraped my knee. My parents weren't physically abusive, but their neglect and emotional coldness cut just as deep. I was treated more like an inconvenience than a child, an unwanted guest overstaying his welcome. School was supposed to be my escape, a place where I could find solace and maybe some semblance of normalcy. But it turned out to be just another battleground. From the very first day, it was clear that my teachers had little patience for me. I was eager to learn, desperate to please, but no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. My grades were consistently lower than my peers, even when I knew I had done just as well, if not better. At first, I thought I was just stupid, that I wasn't as smart as the other kids. But as the years went on, it became clear that the issue wasn't my intelligence. It was my teachers. They seemed to take an almost perverse pleasure in knocking me down. Every time I raised my hand in class, I was either ignored or ridiculed. My assignments were scrutinized more harshly than others, and even when I followed the instructions to the letter, I would receive vague feedback like, "You can do better," or "This isn't good enough." Good. There were times when I would overhear my teachers talking about me in the hallways, assuming I wasn't around. They called me difficult, troublesome, and once, one of them even said, "He's just not a likable kid." That one stung the most. I wasn't sure what I had done to make myself so unlikable, but I internalized it. I started believing that maybe I really was the problem. Despite everything, I wasn't completely alone. My classmates, for reasons I still don't fully understand, were always kind to me. Maybe they could sense the way the adults treated me and felt sorry for me. Or maybe they just saw something in me that the teachers didn't. Whatever the reason, I found myself surrounded by a group of friends who, in their own small ways, helped me survive. One of the first true friends I made was a boy named Tyler. We were in second grade when we met. Tyler was outgoing and funny, the kind of kid who could make friends with anyone. For some reason, he took a liking to me. I remember the day he sat next to me at lunch and started talking about his favorite TV show. I was shy and awkward, not knowing how to respond, but Tyler didn't seem to care. He kept talking, telling me jokes and asking me questions until, eventually, I started to relax. From that day on, we were inseparable. Tyler had a way of making even the darkest days seem a little brighter. When a teacher humiliated me in class, Tyler would lean over and whisper something that would make me laugh. When I got a bad grade on a test, he'd tell me not to worry about it, that the grades didn't mean anything anyway. He was always there, always supportive, and for the first time, I started to believe that maybe I wasn't as worthless as everyone else seemed to think. As we moved into middle school, our group of friends expanded. There was Sarah, a quiet girl who loved to read and draw. She was shy, like me, and we bonded over our shared love of fantasy novels. Then there was Jake, a tall, athletic kid who was on the basketball team. He was the kind of person who got along with everyone, but he was fiercely loyal to his friends. And finally, there was Emily, a fiery redhead with a sharp tongue and a heart of gold. She was the one who would stand up to the teachers when they were being particularly unfair, not just to me, but to anyone. Emily had no problem calling out injustice when she saw it, and she wasn't afraid to get in trouble for it. The four of them became my lifeline. While my parents continued to treat me with indifference, and my teachers seemed determined to see me fail, my friends lifted me up. They were the ones who celebrated my small victories, who encouraged me when I was feeling down, and who reminded me that there was more to life than grades and parental approval. But the teachers' disdain for me didn't stop. It followed me throughout elementary school and into high school. By the time I reached my junior year, it was clear that I was being singled out. My grades, though not failing, were consistently lower than they should have been. I worked hard, studied late into the night, and still, my efforts were never recognized. I remember one history teacher in particular who seemed to have it out for me. No matter how well I did on a test or how much research I put into a paper, I would always get a C or lower. When I finally mustered up the courage to ask her why, she told me, "You just don't have what it takes." That was the moment I realized it wasn't about my abilities. It was personal. For some reason, my teachers had decided that I didn't deserve to succeed, and they were determined to make sure I didn't. I tried talking to my parents about it, hoping they would understand and maybe advocate for me. But they dismissed my concerns, saying I was just making excuses for not working hard enough. My father, in particular, was harsh. He was a man who believed in tough love, though there was rarely any love involved. He would tell me that the world didn't owe me anything, that I needed to stop whining and start acting like a man. My mother wasn't much better. She was more passive in her disapproval, but it was no less painful. She would make snide comments about how I was always causing problems at school, how I was such a disappointment. I remember once, after I had been punished for something I didn't do, I came home crying. My mother looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and disdain and said, "You need to toughen up. No one likes a crybaby." It was around this time that I began to seriously consider giving up. It felt like I was fighting a losing battle, one that I could never win. The thought of dropping out of school crossed my mind more than once, but every time I was about to give in, my friends would pull me back. Tyler, Sarah, Jake, and Emily, each of them, in their own way, kept me grounded. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had people who cared about me, even if it felt like the rest of the world was against me. One of the most shocking events of my high school years happened during my senior year. There was a school-wide competition for a scholarship that would cover college tuition. It was based on a combination of academic performance, an essay, and an interview. Despite my struggles, I was determined to win it. I knew I was just as capable as anyone else, and I saw this as my chance to prove it. I worked tirelessly on my application, pouring my heart and soul into the essay. I stayed up late studying for the exams, making sure I was as prepared as possible. When the day of the interview came, I was nervous, but I felt ready. I walked into that room with my head held high, determined to show them what I was made of. The interview seemed to go well. The panel of teachers asked me questions about my goals, my experiences, and why I thought I deserved the scholarship. I answered honestly, talking about my passion for learning and my determination to overcome the challenges I had faced. For the first time, I felt like they were actually listening to me, that maybe they were seeing me for who I really was. But then, a few days later, the results were announced. I didn't win. Not only that, but the scholarship went to a student who had a well-known reputation for being the teacher's pet. It was clear to everyone that the decision had been rigged. My friends were outraged, and even some of the other students were shocked by the blatant favoritism. But there was nothing I could do. Complaining would only make me look like a sore loser, and I knew that any protest would fall on deaf ears. That was the final straw for me. I had always known that the system was against me, but this was the first time it had been so blatant, so in my face. I felt utterly defeated. My friends tried to console me, but I was beyond comforting. The realization that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be seen as less than, was too much to bear. It was during this dark period that I met the last true friend who would become a part of our group, Nathan. Nathan was a transfer student who had just moved to our town in the middle of the school year. He was quiet and reserved, with a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor. Nathan had his own troubled past, though he didn't talk about it much. We bonded over our shared experiences of being outsiders, of not fitting in with the expectations placed on us. Nathan was different from my other friends in that he didn't try to cheer me up or tell me that things would get better. Instead, he acknowledged my pain and anger, and he didn't shy away from the harsh realities of our situation. He understood that sometimes life wasn't fair, and he didn't sugarcoat it. But he also encouraged me to keep going, not for the approval of others, but for myself. "You're not here to make them happy," he told me one day as we sat in the bleachers after school. "You're here to live your life, and screw anyone who tries to tell you otherwise." Nathan's words stuck with me. They were a turning point, a shift in my mindset. I realized that I had been seeking validation from people who would never give it to me, and in doing so, I had been giving them power over my life. I decided then and there that I wouldn't let them control me anymore. If they wanted to see me fail, I would succeed just to spite them. With the support of my friends, I made it through the rest of high school. My grades didn't improve much, but I didn't care as much anymore. I knew that the grades were a reflection of the teacher's biases, not my abilities. I focused on what I loved: reading, writing, and learning for the sake of learning, not for a letter on a report card. Graduation day was bittersweet. On one hand, I was relieved to be leaving behind the toxic environment of my high school. But on the other hand, I was scared. The world outside those walls was unknown and intimidating. I had no idea what the future held, and I was terrified of failing again. But my friends were there, as they always had been, to remind me that I wasn't alone. We all went our separate ways after graduation. Tyler to a state university, Sarah to an art school, Jake on a basketball scholarship, and Emily to study law. Nathan decided to take a gap year to travel and figure out what he wanted to do with his life. As for me, I was accepted into a small liberal arts college, far enough away from my hometown that I could start fresh. College was supposed to be different. I was supposed to be free from the judgments and prejudices that had plagued me throughout my childhood. But old habits die hard, and the shadows of my past followed me to university. The professors were different from my high school teachers, but the system was the same. I quickly realized that favoritism and bias existed everywhere, and once again I found myself on the outside looking in. My grades were still lower than I knew they should be, and no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't seem to break free from the cycle. I felt like I was running on a treadmill, exerting all my energy but getting nowhere. The only difference was that this time, I had more freedom to choose my battles. I could drop classes where the professors were particularly antagonistic, and I could focus on the subjects I enjoyed. It was in college that I met two more friends who would become like family to me, Lena and Max. Lena was studying psychology, and Max was majoring in computer science. The three of us met during an introductory philosophy class, where we bonded over our shared frustration with the professor's condescending attitude. Lena was brilliant, with a deep understanding of human behavior that often left me in awe. Max was a genius with computers, able to solve complex problems with ease. Together, we formed a trio that balanced each other out. Lena had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of an issue. She was the one who helped me navigate the intricacies of university life, offering advice on how to handle difficult professors and manage the workload. Max, on the other hand, was more laid back. He was the one who reminded me to take a break, to enjoy the little things, and not to let the pressure get to me. Despite the challenges, college wasn't all bad. There were moments of joy and laughter, late-night study sessions that turned into deep philosophical discussions, and weekends spent exploring the city. I started to find my voice, to stand up for myself in ways I never had before, and with Lena and Max by my side, I felt like I could finally start to take control of my life. But just when I thought things were starting to look up, life threw me another curveball. During the second semester of my sophomore year, I was accused of cheating on an exam. The accusation came from a professor who had always seemed to have it out for me. I knew I hadn't cheated. I had studied for that exam for weeks, determined to prove myself. But the professor insisted that my answers were too similar to another student's, and despite my protests, I was reported to the academic board. The investigation was grueling. I was treated like a criminal, subjected to hours of questioning and forced to defend myself against baseless accusations. My friends stood by me, of course, but there was little they could do. It was my word against the professor's, and in the end, the board decided to give me a failing grade on the exam. I was devastated. All my hard work, all my efforts to rise above my circumstances, had been for nothing. It was during this time that I hit rock bottom. The injustice of it all was too much to bear. I felt like I was drowning, unable to escape the weight of my past and the unfairness of my present. I considered dropping out of college, leaving it all behind, and starting over somewhere new. But once again, my friends pulled me back from the edge. Lena, in particular, refused to let me give up. She reminded me that the system was flawed, that the professor's actions were a reflection of his own insecurities, not my abilities. Max helped me appeal the decision, though the process was long and arduous. In the end, the grade was overturned, and I was allowed to retake the exam with a different professor. But the experience left me scarred. I no longer trusted the system, and I became more withdrawn, focusing solely on getting through each day. It wasn't until my senior year that I started to regain some of my confidence. I had made it this far, and I was determined to see it through. I had learned to navigate the pitfalls of academia, to avoid the professors who seemed determined to see me fail, and to focus on the subjects I was passionate about. I graduated with a degree in literature, not with honors, but with the satisfaction of knowing that I had made it despite everything. Graduating from college felt like a major victory, not just for me, but for all of us. We had come a long way from those uncertain high school days, and now we were stepping into the world as adults, ready to carve out our own paths. My friends and I stood together at graduation, clad in our caps and gowns, with our diplomas in hand, looking forward to what the future held. But none of us knew then just how challenging and rewarding that future would be. After graduation, we decided to stay in touch and support each other in our respective careers. But as the months went by, we realized that our dreams weren't as separate as we had once thought. One night, while we were all gathered at my apartment for a dinner party, Max brought up an idea that had been brewing in his mind for some time. "We should start something together," Max said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We've got a great team here. Why not build something we can all be proud of?" "What do you have in mind?" Lena asked, intrigued. Max had always been the visionary in our group, the one who could see possibilities where others saw only challenges. He had a knack for coming up with innovative ideas, and this time was no different. "Furniture," he replied. "I know it sounds random, but hear me out. The furniture market is huge, and with our skills, we could design and sell unique, high-quality pieces that stand out from the rest. I could handle the tech side, building an e-commerce platform, managing inventory, all that stuff. Lena, you could focus on marketing and customer relations. You've got the people skills and the psychology background to really understand what customers want. And you," he pointed at me, "you've got the creativity and the literary background to craft our brand story, to make our furniture more than just furniture, make it something people connect with." At first, the idea seemed far-fetched. None of us had any experience in furniture design or manufacturing. But the more we talked about it, the more it started to make sense. We all had skills that could contribute to the success of the business, and more importantly, we trusted each other. The thought of building something together, something that was ours, was incredibly appealing. "We could be our own bosses," I added, the idea growing on me. "We wouldn't have to deal with anyone else's bullshit. We could create a company that treats people right, that makes quality products without cutting corners." Emily, who had been quiet up until this point, nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like a lot of work, but if we do it right, it could be amazing. I've been thinking about getting out of law anyway. The corporate world isn't what I thought it would be. I'd love to help with the legal side, making sure everything's above board." And just like that, the idea was born. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly to flesh out the details. We pooled our savings and started sketching out a business plan. Max took on the task of building our website and setting up the e-commerce platform. Lena dove into market research, identifying gaps in the market and figuring out how we could position ourselves to fill them. Emily worked on the legal aspects, making sure our business was properly registered and that we had all the necessary licenses. As for me, I threw myself into the creative side. I started designing the initial pieces of our furniture line, drawing inspiration from a mix of modern minimalism and rustic charm. I wrote the copy for our website, crafting a narrative that emphasized quality, sustainability, and craftsmanship. We wanted our customers to feel like they were buying more than just a piece of furniture. They were buying a story, a connection to something real and meaningful. We decided to call our company Hearth and Timber, a name that evoked warmth, comfort, and the natural beauty of wood. It wasn't just about selling furniture. It was about creating spaces where people could feel at home, surrounded by pieces that told a story. But starting a business from scratch was far from easy. The first major obstacle we faced was finding a reliable manufacturer. We wanted to keep production local to ensure quality and support the community. But most manufacturers we approached either weren't interested in working with a startup or demanded more money than we could afford. After weeks of searching, we finally found a small family-owned workshop in a nearby town. The owner, Mr. Carter, was an elderly man with decades of experience in woodworking. He was skeptical at first, but after seeing our designs and hearing our story, he agreed to take a chance on us. He admired our passion and was willing to work with us on a smaller scale to start, with the understanding that we would grow together. With production underway, we turned our attention to launching the business. Max had built a sleek, user-friendly website that showcased our designs beautifully. Lena crafted a marketing campaign that focused on social media, using Instagram and Pinterest to reach potential customers who appreciated quality craftsmanship and unique designs. But despite our best efforts, the first few months were brutal. We weren't getting nearly as many orders as we had hoped. The competition was fierce, and established brands had much bigger marketing budgets than we did. Our savings were dwindling fast, and the pressure was mounting. One of the most shocking setbacks came when we discovered that a larger, well-known furniture company had copied one of our designs and was selling it at a lower price. They had the resources to mass-produce the piece cheaply, and we couldn't compete with their pricing. It felt like a punch to the gut. All our hard work, our creativity, had been stolen, and there was little we could do about it. Emily tried to pursue legal action, but it was an uphill battle. The larger company had a team of lawyers ready to fight any claims, and the cost of litigation was more than we could afford. It was a hard pill to swallow, but we had to let it go and focus on moving forward. The stress started to take its toll on all of us. We were working long hours, often late into the night, trying to keep the business afloat. Tensions ran high, and there were moments when it felt like everything was falling apart. I remember one particularly bad night when Max and Lena got into a heated argument about the direction of the marketing campaign. Lena felt that we needed to focus more on storytelling and branding, while Max was convinced that we needed to invest more in paid advertising. "You don't get it, Lena!" Max snapped, his frustration boiling over. "We're not reaching enough people. We need more visibility, not more fancy words." "And you don't get that people don't just buy products. They buy stories," Lena shot back. "We need to connect with our customers on an emotional level, or we're just another faceless company." I could see both sides of the argument, but at that moment, all I wanted was for the fighting to stop. We were all exhausted, and the stress was making us lash out at each other. I stepped in, trying to calm things down. "Guys, we're all on the same team here," I said, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We're all working toward the same goal. Let's take a step back and figure out a way to combine both strategies. We need to reach more people, yes, but we also need to make sure that when they find us, they understand who we are and what we stand for." It wasn't an easy conversation, but eventually, we found a compromise. We decided to allocate a small portion of our budget to paid advertising while doubling down on our content marketing efforts. Lena and I worked together to create a series of blog posts and videos that showcase the craftsmanship behind our furniture, the stories of the artisans who built them, and the sustainable materials we used. We also started reaching out to influencers and interior designers who shared our values, hoping to build partnerships that would help spread the word. Meanwhile, Max refined our website's search engine optimization, SEO, to ensure that when people searched for the kinds of products we offered, hearth and timber would appear at the top of the results. It was a slow process, but little by little, we started to see an increase in traffic to our site. Despite the challenges, there were moments of hope. One of our first big breaks came when a popular home decor blog featured our furniture in an article about sustainable living. The article praised our commitment to quality and our unique designs, and it brought a surge of traffic to our website. Orders started coming in faster than we could have imagined, and for the first time, it felt like we were on the right track. But success didn't come without its own set of challenges. As demand grew, so did the pressure to scale up production. Mr. Carter's workshop, while perfect for our initial needs, was struggling to keep up with the volume of orders. We faced a tough decision. Either we would need to find a larger manufacturer or risk losing customers due to long wait times. The idea of leaving Mr. Carter's workshop behind was heartbreaking. He had been with us from the beginning, and we had developed a close relationship, but he understood the reality of the situation better than anyone. "You kids have a good thing going here," Mr. Carter told us one afternoon as we discussed the future. "I'm proud to have been a part of it, but I can't keep up with this kind of demand. You need to find someone who can help you grow. It's the only way you'll survive." It was difficult, but we knew he was right. We began searching for a larger manufacturer that shared our commitment to quality and sustainability. After weeks of meetings and negotiations, we finally found a partner who understood our vision and was willing to work with us on our terms. It was a major step forward, and it allowed us to start fulfilling orders more quickly and efficiently. As we settled into our new production process, the business started to stabilize. We were no longer just trying to survive. We were starting to thrive. Our customer base grew steadily, and we began receiving positive reviews and testimonials from satisfied customers. It was incredibly validating to see that all our hard work was paying off. During this time, something else began to change. Lena and I, who had always been close friends, started spending more time together outside of work. It began innocently enough. Late-night brainstorming sessions that turned into long walks around the city. Dinners that stretched into the early hours of the morning. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our pasts. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else, and I realized that my feelings for her were growing stronger. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at the office, we decided to take a break and grab a drink at a nearby bar. The atmosphere was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to the tension we had been feeling at work. As we sat at the bar, sipping our drinks and talking about the future, I noticed a change in Lena's demeanor. She seemed more relaxed, more at ease, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to her. "I'm really proud of what we've built," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I know it hasn't been easy, but we've made it through some tough times, and I couldn't have done it without you." "Same here," I replied, my heart racing. "You've been my rock through all of this, Lena." I don't know what I'd do without you." There was a moment of silence as we both processed what we had just said. I could feel the tension between us, the unspoken feelings that had been building for months. And then, without thinking, I leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, but it felt like everything I had been holding back for so long was finally being released. Lena kissed me back, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The stress, the challenges, the uncertainty. All that mattered was that we were together. When we finally pulled away, Lena looked at me with a mix of surprise and happiness. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," she admitted, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Me too," I confessed, feeling a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in years. From that night on, our relationship changed. We didn't rush into anything, but we both knew that something special was growing between us. It wasn't just about the business anymore. Our connection went deeper than that. We were partners in every sense of the word, and it felt like we could face anything as long as we were together. But our newfound happiness was soon tested when we faced our biggest challenge yet. One of our main competitors, a large, well-established furniture company, launched an aggressive campaign aimed at discrediting us. They spread rumors that our products were of poor quality, that we were cutting corners, and that our business practices were unethical. It was a blatant attempt to undermine our reputation, and it worked. Sales plummeted, and our once thriving business was suddenly on the brink of collapse. The worst part was that we had no idea how to fight back. We didn't have the resources to launch a counter-campaign, and any attempts to defend ourselves only seemed to make things worse. Customers were canceling orders, and we started receiving negative reviews from people who had never even purchased our products. It felt like everything we had worked so hard for was slipping through our fingers. The stress was overwhelming, and there were days when I didn't think we would make it. But Lena, ever the optimist, refused to give up. "We've faced tough times before," she reminded me one evening as we sat together in the office, trying to come up with a plan. "We just need to stay focused and find a way to turn this around." "But how?" I asked, feeling defeated. "They're too big, too powerful. We're just a small company. They can crush us if they want to." "Maybe," Lena replied, her eyes narrowing in determination. "But they can't take away what makes us unique. We need to remind our customers why they chose us in the first place, why they believed in hearth and timber." Her words sparked something in me, and I realized she was right. We couldn't outspend or out-advertise our competitors, but we could outshine them by staying true to our values. We decided to launch a new campaign, one that focused on transparency and authenticity. We invited customers to visit our workshop, to meet the artisans who crafted their furniture, and to see firsthand the care and attention that went into every piece. We also reached out to our loyal customers, asking them to share their experiences with hearth and timber on social media. The response was overwhelming. People posted pictures of their homes, showcasing our furniture and telling the stories behind each piece. It was heartwarming to see how much our products meant to them, and it gave us the boost we needed to keep fighting. The campaign gained traction, and slowly but surely, we started to rebuild our reputation. Sales began to pick up again, and the negative reviews were drowned out by a flood of positive testimonials. It wasn't an easy process, but with each small victory, our confidence grew. During this time, Lena and I grew even closer. Our relationship had always been built on mutual respect and trust, but now it was something more, something deeper. We were partners in every sense, supporting each other through the highs and lows, and finding strength in our connection. Eventually, our perseverance paid off. The competitors' smear campaign backfired when it was revealed that they had been engaging in unethical practices themselves. The news spread quickly, and the public backlash was severe. Customers who had abandoned us returned, and new customers flocked to us, impressed by our integrity and commitment to quality. It felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Hearth and Timber was not just surviving, it was thriving. Our sales soared, and we expanded our product line to include custom pieces and limited edition collections. We even opened a small showroom where customers could see our furniture in person, and it quickly became a popular destination for design enthusiasts. As the business continued to grow, so did our team. We hired new employees, bringing in talented designers, craftsmen, and marketing experts who shared our vision. It was amazing to see how far we had come, from a group of friends with a dream to a successful company making a real impact in the industry. And through it all, Lena and I remained inseparable. Our relationship blossomed, and we supported each other not just in business, but in life. We celebrated our successes together, leaned on each other during the tough times, and built a future that was filled with hope and possibility. Planning a wedding is supposed to be one of the most joyous times in a person's life. For Lena and me, it was no different. After everything we had been through together, the challenges, the triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the overwhelming joy of building a life and a business, we were finally ready to make it official. Our relationship had been tested time and again, and each time we had come out stronger. This wedding was a celebration of our love, of our journey, and of the future we were so excited to embrace together. The wedding was set to take place in a beautiful vineyard just outside the city. It was the perfect venue, with rolling hills, lush greenery, and a view of the sunset that was nothing short of breathtaking. We had invited all of our closest friends and family, including everyone who had supported us throughout our journey with Hearth and Timber. It was going to be a small, intimate affair, just the way we wanted it. As the big day approached, everything seemed to be falling into place. The venue was decorated with Lena's impeccable taste, simple yet elegant, with soft white flowers and rustic wooden accents that perfectly reflected our style. Max was in charge of the music, and he had put together a playlist that blended our favorite songs with romantic classics. Emily, ever the organized one, had taken on the role of wedding planner, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Even Tyler, who had become a bit of a nomad in recent years, traveling the world and working as a freelance photographer, had flown in to be my best man. It felt like the culmination of all our hard work, all our dreams. Lena and I were about to start the next chapter of our lives, surrounded by the people we loved the most. But as fate would have it, the day that was supposed to be the happiest of our lives quickly turned into one of the most shocking and chaotic. The ceremony was set for late afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the vineyard. Lena looked stunning in her dress, a simple yet elegant gown that accentuated her natural beauty. I could hardly believe how lucky I was as I stood at the altar, waiting for her to walk down the aisle. As the ceremony began, everything was perfect. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about the journey Lena and I had taken to get to this point. I could feel the warmth and love from everyone gathered there, and as I looked into Lena's eyes, I knew that no matter what happened, we were going to be okay. But just as the officiant asked if anyone had any objections to our marriage, the doors to the venue flew open with a loud bang. Everyone turned in shock as my parents stormed in, their faces twisted with anger and resentment. The sight of them immediately sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't invited them to the wedding for obvious reasons, but I never imagined they would crash it in such a dramatic fashion. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of shock and anger. My father stepped forward, his eyes cold and hard. "We're here to stop this travesty of a wedding," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "You're making a huge mistake, and we're not going to let it happen." Lena tightened her grip on my hand, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been a terrible son," my mother spat, stepping up beside my father. "You've disrespected us, cut us out of your life, and now you think you can just get married and start a new life without us? Not on our watch." The guests were whispering among themselves, clearly shocked and uncomfortable with the sudden intrusion. Max, Emily, and Tyler quickly moved to stand by my side, their faces set in determination. "You need to leave," Max said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. But my parents were not deterred. "We're not going anywhere until we make this right," my father declared. "You've disgraced this family, and you're not fit to run a company. We're here to take what's rightfully ours." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What are you talking about? Hearth and Timber is my company, my life's work. You have no claim to it." "That's where you're wrong," my father sneered. "We've already spoken to our lawyer. You wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for us. We funded your education, raised you, and this is how you repay us? By cutting us out of your life? We're going to make sure you pay for what you've done." The situation was spiraling out of control. I could see the panic and confusion on the faces of our guests, and I knew we needed to act quickly. Without hesitation, Emily pulled out her phone and started dialing. "What are you doing?" my mother demanded, her voice rising in anger. "I'm calling the police," Emily said calmly. "You've crashed this wedding, and now you're making threats. This is private property, and you're trespassing." My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You can't do this to us! We're his parents!" "You lost the right to call yourselves his parents the moment you decided to ruin his wedding," Emily shot back, her voice icy. The tension in the room was palpable as we waited for the police to arrive. My parents continued to hurl accusations and threats, but I could barely hear them. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. How had things come to this? Why were my parents so determined to destroy everything I had worked for? Within minutes, the police arrived and escorted my parents out of the venue. It was a humiliating scene, and I could feel the eyes of every guest on me as I watched my parents being led away in handcuffs. I felt a mix of relief and deep sadness. This wasn't how I had imagined my wedding day would go, but at least Lena and I were still standing together, ready to face whatever came next. But the nightmare wasn't over. The very next day, I received a notice that my parents were suing me for control of Hearth and Timber. They were claiming that they had a right to the company because they had supported me financially during my upbringing. It was an absurd and baseless claim, but it was clear they were serious. "I can't believe they're doing this," I said, my voice thick with disbelief as I read through the legal documents. "This is insane." Lena put her hand on my shoulder, her touch comforting. "We'll fight this and we'll win," she said firmly. "They don't have a leg to stand on." Emily, who had quickly taken charge of the situation, was already on the phone with our lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Claire, who specialized in corporate law. Claire had been with us since the early days of Hearth and Timber, and I trusted her completely. "They're trying to scare you," Claire said after reviewing the case. "They're hoping you'll back down, but they don't have a solid case. We'll fight this in court, and we'll make sure they don't get away with this." But despite Claire's reassurances, the thought of going to court against my own parents was terrifying. It felt like everything I had built was being threatened, not just by external forces, but by the very people who were supposed to love and support me. As the court date approached, the stress began to take its toll. Lena and I were both exhausted, barely sleeping as we prepared for the legal battle ahead. But we weren't alone. Our friends rallied around us, offering their support in any way they could. Max took on more responsibilities at the company to ease the burden on me, while Emily worked tirelessly with Claire to build our case. Tyler, who had always been the wild card in our group, surprised us all by stepping up in a big way, using his connections in the media to get our side of the story out before my parents could spin their own narrative. "People need to know the truth," Tyler said one evening as we gathered in our living room, poring over documents and strategizing for the trial. "We can't let them paint you as the villain." The day of the trial arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and determination as we walked into the courthouse. The courtroom was packed with people, journalists, curious onlookers, and even some of our customers who had come to show their support. My parents sat on the opposite side of the room, their faces hard and unyielding. It was clear they weren't going to back down. As the trial began, Claire laid out our case with precision and clarity. She pointed out the absurdity of my parents' claims, highlighting the fact that they had no legal or financial ties to Hearth and Timber. She also brought up their history of neglect and emotional abuse, arguing that their actions were driven by spite and greed rather than any genuine interest in the company. But my parents' lawyer was just as aggressive. He painted me as an ungrateful son who had abandoned his parents after they had sacrificed so much for him. He argued that my parents were entitled to a share of the company because they had invested in my future. It was a brutal back and forth, with both sides presenting their arguments with intensity. But what shocked me the most was when my father took the stand and began to spew lies about our family history. He claimed that I had always been a problem child, that I had rebelled against them at every turn, and that they had been forced to rescue me from my own poor decisions time and time again. "Your Honor," my father said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "we only want what's fair. We want our son to succeed, but we can't stand by and watch him throw away everything we've worked for." I could barely contain my anger as I listened to his testimony. This was the man who had treated me like an unwanted burden for most of my life, and now he was trying to rewrite history to suit his narrative. But I knew that reacting emotionally would only hurt our case, so I forced myself to stay calm. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. I spoke about the neglect, the emotional abuse, and the years of struggling to earn their approval, only to be met with disappointment and disdain. I described how I had built Hearth and Timber from the ground up with the support of my friends and my own hard work, and how my parents had played no part in that journey. As I spoke, I could see the faces of the jury softening. They could tell that I was telling the truth, that this wasn't just a business dispute. It was a deeply personal battle between a son and his parents. In the end, the jury saw through my parents' lies. After just a few hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict in our favor. My parents' lawsuit was dismissed, and they were ordered to pay all legal fees. It was a decisive victory, but it didn't feel like a triumph. Instead, I felt a deep sense of sadness that it had come to this, that my own parents had tried to destroy everything I had worked for out of spite. As we left the courthouse, the media swarmed us, eager for a statement. Claire handled most of the questions, but when a reporter asked how I felt about the outcome, I couldn't help but speak from the heart. "I'm relieved that justice was served," I said, my voice steady but tinged with sadness. "But this isn't a victory, it's a tragedy. No one should have to go through what I went through, being betrayed by the people who are supposed to love and support you. I hope that by sharing my story, others will see that you don't have to let toxic relationships define you. You can rise above them and build a life on your own terms. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. The media coverage of the trial brought a lot of attention to Hearth and Timber, and while it was good for business, it was also overwhelming. Customers and supporters flooded our social media with messages of encouragement. But there were also those who sided with my parents, accusing me of being heartless and ungrateful. But through it all, Lena was my rock. She stood by me, offering her unwavering support and reminding me that we had built something incredible together. Something that no one could take away from us. "We're in this together," she said one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset. "No matter what happens, we'll face it as a team." Her words gave me the strength I needed to move forward. I knew that as long as we had each other, we could handle anything life threw at us. As the dust settled from the trial, Lena and I began to focus on our future. We finally had the wedding we had dreamed of, a small private ceremony with just our closest friends. It wasn't as grand as the original wedding, but it was perfect in its simplicity. We exchanged vows under the stars, surrounded by the people who had supported us through thick and thin. In the months that followed, Hearth and Timber continued to thrive. The publicity from the trial, combined with our renewed focus on transparency and customer engagement, helped us expand our reach even further. We opened new showrooms in several cities, launched a line of eco-friendly furniture, and even started a charitable initiative to support local artisans and craftsmen. But more importantly, Lena and I built a life together that was filled with love, joy, and purpose. We bought a house in the countryside, a peaceful retreat where we could escape the stresses of running a business and enjoy the simple pleasures of life. We traveled, explored new places, and made memories that would last a lifetime.